COP26 Net Zero Summit. We have ministers from over 40 countries here today and representatives from international organisations, civil society and the private sector. I'll start by giving the floor to our two co-chairs. So first to you, Executive Director. Why are we here today and what do you hope to achieve?
Thank you very much, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. We are here today because the largest economies of the world have committed themselves to bring their emissions to net zero by 2050 or 2060, and others made some commitments to bring their emissions down. If you put all these countries who made commitments to bring their emissions to net zero by 2050, it is about 70% of global emissions. And it's a big number. And I think it should give a hope to our UK hosts, COP hosts. And it is also promising for all of us, for the world, that we may well be in line reach 1.5 degrees target we all want to reach. So it's a great news. But there's a but here. No country alone can reach these targets. What is needed? What is needed is the international collaboration. International collaboration is, in fact, the leitmotif of this very summit today. At the IEA, we are, as many of you know, we are a data-driven organization. We make data analysis, policy recommendations on any issue, energy-related issues, without fear and without favor. And when we look at the climate change challenge, I see two important components. First, we have to make use of the existing technologies, more renewables, more solar energy. Recently, we have crowned solar energy as the king of global electricity markets. Onshore wind, offshore wind, electric cars, and energy efficiency. But this is alone not enough to reach our 1.5 degrees target. In addition to those, making most out of the existing targets, existing technologies, we have to get new advanced clean energy technologies in the markets. The name, the magical word here is innovation. We need carbon capture, we need batteries, we need hydrogen in all the sectors of energy. As such, it is a critical issue. So we have two things to do: make the most out of the existing clean energy technologies, and second, as a result of innovation, we have to bring new clean energy technologies in the markets. Now, dear colleagues, 18th of May is, I believe, an important date in the energy and climate calendar this year. In about 6 weeks of time, the world will have its net zero roadmap. How the world, energy world, needs to transform itself to reach the net zero target. And we are releasing on 18th of May our report, which was also requested by the, Mr. Sharma and his team, to show the world that there is a lot of work to do, but it can be done. It can be done. How the world can come to 1.5 degrees Celsius target by making more of the existing technologies and getting new technologies. But I can tell you, the amount of the challenge is huge, and this can be only achieved, in my view, with global cooperation and collaboration among the countries. And in my view, this is critical for the next years to come. And I would like to quote my friend Alok. He said much more eloquently than me. He said, "It is by working together we can innovate faster, create economies of scale, and drive stronger incentives for investments." So this is exactly the issue of this very summit. We have brought more than 40 ministers around the world together. And as my colleague Catherine Dixon said, a lot of heads of international institutions, the finance institutions, thought leaders, civil society, we are all here together to see how we can foster international collaboration. Now, to finish my words before going to my colleague Alok Sharma, I want to come up with a small surprise to all of you. Now, as part of this summit, when working on the summit, we developed, as the International Energy Agency, 7 key principles that provide a framework for countries to work together and translate their ambitious targets into real emission reductions by putting credible energy policies. And these 7 key principles have been supported, have been associated by several governments around the world, and I expect more to come. Right after this meeting, we are going to release our 7 key principles to international press that you can look at it and give us what you think, how we can improve it further. Now, dear colleagues, I would like to finish here by saying that as the UK provides much needed leadership, I would like to, as the head of the IEA, offer IEA's full support for Glasgow and beyond.
Thank you, Executive Director. And now over to our co-host, Mr. Alok Sharma, the COP26 President.
Thank you so much for that, Fatih, and thank you for your friendship and all your cooperation as well. Indeed, to all our IEA colleagues for co-hosting the summit, and a very warm welcome to all friends who have joined us today. As we know, in 2015, the world came together and forged the Paris Agreement, and we established a shared goal. And that shared goal was to limit average global temperature rises to below 2 degrees and closer to that 1.5 degrees target. And of course, achieving that goal relies on the world reaching net zero by the middle of the century. Now, as Fatih has said in his remarks, 70% of the world's economy is covered by net zero targets. And of course, that is positive. And we call on all countries to commit to a net zero world. But my friends, not enough is being done to meet that net zero target. On our current course, we are heading for global temperature rises of over 3 degrees. That will cause devastation in each and every country that is represented here today in this conference. And in many cases, it'll be the catalyst for an apocalyptic future. So we must do much more now to turn remote targets into immediate action. Because we know that to meet the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement, we need to halve global emissions by 2030. We simply cannot afford another decade of deliberation. We need this to be the decade of delivery, and we need countries to act by making credible plans to reach net zero targets. And of course, that includes ambitious nationally determined contributions, and very importantly, putting in place policies and investments now to meet the targets. So that's policies like ending the use of coal. That's absolutely paramount. The 500 gigawatts worth of new coal power stations that are planned around the world is quite frankly an anathema to the Paris Agreement. So countries need to phase out coal domestically. They need to move towards renewable sources and stop funding polluting power abroad. I'm very pleased to say that from a UK perspective, the UK is no longer providing new direct financial or promotional support for fossil fuel energy sectors overseas. And speaking of policies, we also need countries to set a date to move to 100% zero emission vehicle sales. And we need the G7 countries leading the way. And of course, donor countries must honor their commitment to raise that $100 billion a year in international climate finance. I keep saying this is a matter of the utmost trust. And of course, we also need to get private finance flowing. So my message to donor countries is very, very clear. Without adequate finance, the task ahead is well nigh impossible. But as well as taking action individually, countries must work together, as Fatih said. The emissions reductions required to keep the 1.5 degrees target within reach rely on rapid structural change across the entire global economy. And these are only achievable if we collaborate. And that collaboration needs to be across borders, across society, with business, investors, civil society, governments of all levels working together. That is why I have made enhancing international collaboration a key goal of the UK's COP26 presidency. This, quite frankly, is not a matter of shouldering a burden between us, but of sharing an opportunity. The move to a clean economy benefits us all through creating jobs, spurring sustainable development, and cleaning up our air. And by working together, we can get the transition going faster in at least 4 ways. First, we can create strong incentives for investment. Second, we can innovate faster. Third, we can achieve economies of scale. And fourth, we can create level playing fields to prevent polluting incumbents undercutting clean alternatives. But we will only access these gains if we tailor our approach to each sector, responding to their particular markets and challenges, and getting the key players around the table. And that, as colleagues on this call will know, is the approach that we are taking in our COP26 campaigns in 3 critical areas: within clean energy, in clean transport, and nature, which together make up almost 60% of global emissions. So let's take clean energy first. Wind and solar power, as we know, are cheaper than coal over most of the world. And yet many countries dealing with rapidly rising energy demand lack the financial or technical support to take this opportunity. And the transition from coal must be fair. So we've established the Energy Transition Council, whose members, of course, include the IEA, but also IRENA, the ILO, and major public financial institutions. It works with governments, business, and civil society to improve support to countries so that clean power is always the most attractive option and that communities are supported. We now look at road transport. Of course, the challenge is different. This is a sector where 10 countries make up 3/4 of the global market. Together, we can incentivize manufacturers everywhere to shift investment more quickly into zero-emission vehicles, increasing those economies of scale to bring down costs for all countries. Now, to achieve this, we've set up the Zero-Emission Vehicles Transition Council. And again, this is bringing together ministers from some of the world's biggest car markets to see how we can tackle these challenges. In terms of challenges, of course, deforestation is different again. The international trade in products like beef, like soya and palm oil and cocoa contributes to much of the deforestation around the world. So to tackle these issues, we've established the Forest, Agriculture and Commodity Trade Dialogue, bringing together producer and consumer countries to grow markets for sustainable production whilst enhancing livelihoods. And this means working with businesses and civil society, indigenous people and investors. And I want to thank absolutely everyone who's involved in these initiatives. You're making a huge difference. And I call on all governments, business, financial institutions, and civil society to help us drive progress in all of these sectors. Work with us to extend this approach so we take concerted effort in other critical areas as well, like industry, like buildings, like aviation and shipping. But friends, such action can no longer be seen as a sideshow. We must place focused collaboration within each sector at the heart of international efforts on climate change over the coming decade. And we must build dedicated international forums for international collaboration in each of the main emitting sectors. At the same time, we must work together to deliver practical solutions on adaptation and finance, which of course, as some of you will know, is the focus of the COP26 Climate and Developmental Ministerial meeting that we are also holding today. I very much look forward to hearing the views of all colleagues here on how we can work together, including through institutions like the IEA and the Marrakesh Partnership, which are crucial. Friends, our task is urgent, but with immediate action and strong collaboration, we can make this the decade of delivery. a decade where we keep the 1.5-degree target within reach, a decade where we create jobs and prosperity, and a decade in which we protect our planet for future generations. Thank you.
Well, thank you to both co-chairs. In a moment, we will turn to representatives from the major economies and institutions. But before we do that, our chief modeler here at the IEA, Ms. Laura Cozzi, is going to help set the scene for us on what the road to net zero looks like.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to our summit. In the next couple of minutes, I'm going to give you a sneak preview of our roadmap to net zero by 2050. We will be launching this new comprehensive report for the global energy sector transition on 18th of May, so please mark your calendars. We are currently busy analyzing more than 800 technologies and looking at all power plants and factories in the world. We are making use of the most powerful energy and technology models here at the IEA to design an orderly transition and identify milestones for governments, industries, and citizens. The prize at the end of the journey is really huge. Clean, prosperous, and resilient global economy in 2050, which achieves our most ambitious climate goals. But to get there, we need to transform our energy system at a speed and scale that we've never seen before. From how we fuel our vehicles to how we heat our homes, we cool our offices and power our factories. We will be in cities where electric cars, buses, and bike lanes keep our air free of pollution. Steel mills that use hydrogen no longer spew out carbon into the atmosphere. Our new energy-efficient homes and offices use smart and digital technologies that ensure energy is no longer wasted. New generations of ships are powered by ammonia, and planes will be running on new low-carbon fuels. In this journey, maintaining energy security, providing energy for all, and ensuring a just transition will be more critical than ever before. This transformation requires international collaboration on a new scale, driving innovation, mobilizing investment, and creating new jobs. Thanks for your attention.
So thank you very much. As was mentioned, we are now going to have a discussion with the top representatives of the global economies and the institutions. Our key word again will be international collaboration. I would like to start with the United States, Mr. John Kerry. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this discussion. I know it is very early in the morning in the United States. Very much appreciated, Mr. Secretary. And it is, of course, great to welcome the United States back into Paris Agreement. We miss you a lot, United States. So thank you very much for coming back. So just to start, Mr. Kerry, we are all heartened by the Biden administration's some of the bold actions, including the recent support for offshore wind. This is a great news, as well as the very issue that I guess today or tomorrow we are going to have a clean energy infrastructure bill. So this is also very good. Keeping all of these things in mind, how do you see, Secretary Kerry, at home in the United States and also globally, how we can foster international collaboration? Thank you very much.
Well, Fatih, thank you very much for the privilege of being here with you. And I'm delighted to be with all of the distinguished panelists and have an opportunity to share thoughts. I think it's important in response to your question for us not to force. I don't think we can force people to do things. I think we need to invite particularly the developed world to the table and the biggest emitters. I mean, we have sitting here at this table this morning, several of the largest emitters in the world. And if you put the United States and Europe and China together, even without counting India, we're well over 50% of all the emissions in the world, right there. We had a famous bank robber in the United States of America. His name was Willie Sutton, and he was asked, well, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. And I think we need a corollary to that. Where are the emissions? You go where the emissions are in this endeavor. You go where the emissions are to start with, principally. Everybody needs to be part of that because we don't want developed countries repeating the mistakes that we have made since the 1800s. So this goes back. But the reality is none of us can get there alone. The United States could go to zero tomorrow, or China could go to zero tomorrow. And if everybody else continued to do what they're doing today, the planet is in trouble, deep trouble. None of us can do this alone. We must do this together. That's what we did in Paris. That's what we must do when we go to Glasgow. But right now, I mean, I don't want to be the scold. I do not want to be the America, the United States doesn't want to be the voice that's always calling us to account on the science. But we're here because of science. This is not politics. This is not ideology. This is not some political goal. This is not a pet project of 1 or 2 or 3 countries. This is a reality that the scientists for years have been telling us. And Mother Earth, the planet, is screaming at us with the feedback loops that are telling us every single day, get this done. Not to mention the next generations that are likewise screaming at us and saying to us, hey, adults, please be adults. Make the decisions we need to make. So we are regrettably, I mean, this is just the science. We are all on a curve today that is going to about a 3 point, well, let me just stop and do one other point of reference here. I was very proud of what we all did in Paris. I'm sure you are. Paris was a giant leap forward. But even if we did everything that we promised to do in Paris, Earth's temperature will still rise to about 3.7 degrees if we did everything in Paris, and we're not. So if we are looking at the curve we're on now, we're actually headed over 4 degrees. I don't want to debate how much. It's a debate nobody can win. But when the scientists uniformly tell us we're heading on this terrible curve, we know we have to speed up. Now, I am a veteran of the fights over common but differentiated responsibility. That was part of what we fought over in Paris. And Paris is a monument to differentiation because every country wrote its own plan. But everybody only did what they sort of wanted to do. Now, with a look back from where we are in 2021, we know we have to do a lot more. All of us have to do more. And what's interesting is it is easy to do it for many countries. Some countries are resisting, despite the fact that we're looking at the biggest job market the world has ever known. 4 to 5 billion people today are users of energy. It will go up to 9 billion in the next 30 years, and it will be a double-digit trillions of dollars of market. So this is the greatest economic opportunity we've ever had to build our countries. Every job we need to do this, build out a grid, build solar power, wind power, do hydrogen, every list, building batteries, switching to electric vehicles, all require jobs. Every one of those are people working. And yet some people are still choosing to build a coal-fired power plant, which is the dirtiest, worst fuel in the world. In America, no bank will fund a coal-fired plant. In Europe, no bank will fund a coal-fired plant. So we have to apply common sense to this task. And I believe we've got to get sort of together and bring ourselves to a point where we understand that Glasgow could honestly well be. I've been doing this since 1988 when Jim Hansen first spoke. And I'll tell you, after Kyoto and after Rio and all these COPs, here we are. We're going to have many of the same discussions. We don't need discussion. We need to do what we need to do as countries. Will it be the same plan for everybody? No. Do we respect that there are differentiated responsibilities? Yes. But we can't just willy-nilly ignore the next 10 years. Why? Because once again, the scientists tell us that if we don't do enough in these 10 years, We cannot keep the Earth's temperature at 1.5 degrees. And if we do not do enough in the next 10 years, we cannot even get on a roadmap to net zero by 2050, because no country can reduce the emissions sufficiently with the curve you have after 2030 if we don't do enough now. So my plea is for all of us to avoid the happy talk, to recognize that this challenge is global, that never has there been a challenge that requires the unity of countries all across the planet to do this than now. We can do it. That's what's exciting. We panelists and countries not here right now are privileged to have the opportunity to effect this great transition. And Fatih, you've done amazing work. Our colleagues here have all done amazing work. But we obviously have this huge lift still to accomplish over the next months. President Biden today, I will be with the president in a few hours in the White House. We're going to have a meeting with our team on climate. President will announce several trillions of dollars of investment. We're going to build out our grid. We're going to reduce our emissions. We're going to step up in a very significant way. So it's not talk from the United States. And in a few weeks at our summit, the president will announce our NDC, which will be strong, and we will stay at this table with all of you to do the great work of this gargantuan endeavor. We cannot fail. We simply cannot fail. And I look forward to working with every single one of you. The United States is really anxious to get this done and to collaborate, to help bring the finance to the table, to help with the transition technologically, working partnerships all across the world. That's what we need to do, and that will get the job done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, both for the encouraging news you gave us from the United States, but also underlining the critical importance of next 10 years and, as we discussed in the beginning, fostering international collaboration. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Now, may I turn to Dr. Ngozi of WTO. Dr. Ngozi, you recently take up to office as the Director General of the WTO. And you recently said, Dr. Ngozi, that the WTO can do more in order to address the climate challenge. Can you please tell us what do you see the WTO's role in order to help the countries to reach their energy and climate goals? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, thanks to you all. I'm happy to be here. Let me make 4 points. I think the first point is that, as we all know and have heard, climate change is a global public bad, which could seriously undermine the role of trade as an engine of economic growth and poverty reduction, posing risks to all countries. Sea level rise and extreme events could affect the transport, distribution, communications, and logistics networks underpinning modern-day supply chains. We all saw what happened recently with the Ever Given in the Suez Canal. It was not a climate change event, I hasten to say, but it brought to mind what could happen to trade and to supply chains should we have this climate change type of events. And this is why we must spend no time. We must muster the collective energy for a global response to this issue. Listening to Secretary Alok Sharma, listening to Secretary Kerry and what they had to say, very, very encouraging, especially with the US rejoining the Paris Agreement and helping us to muster the global response that is needed. Having WTO members, many of whom are represented around this table, support the crafting of rules, of trade rules that can underpin the greening of our planet is crucial. So having you at COP26 now supporting your WTO ambassadors and ministers to come together for us to make the relevant trade rules that can help green the planet. It's very important. Now, greening trade and pushing for environmental goods and services, making them accessible and affordable would be a major step forward for all of us. Take renewable energy, for example. It's been talked about in just a decade. We heard solar, voltaic, and wind power have become the cheapest sources of electricity in many markets. The cost of solar energy, for example, has decreased 80% since 2010. Jobs in the renewable energy sector, around 11 million worldwide in 2018, are expected to quadruple by 2050. Now, trade has played a key role in turbocharging these developments by unlocking investment, fostering innovation, and allowing the movement of these goods and services around the world. The third point I'd like to make is that international trade and WTO rules must support effective action on climate change. We need members of the WTO to converge on their positions as we move towards the 12th ministerial conference, where a lot of decisions will be made in December. This will be just after COP26. We have started important initiatives on trade and environmental sustainability. Right now, 53 members have come together working to achieve concrete results on how we look at environmental goods and services, how we trade them, and the rules that underpin that, so that we can foster the movement of those goods that are very beneficial to greening the planet. We've also started an initiative on plastic pollution, and we hope to have some results and scaling up on this. As you know, 4 to 5% of annual global oil consumption is associated with plastics. And if this continues, plastics will account for 20% of oil consumption by 2050. And therefore, action on plastics is very important. We are also looking to how we can contribute on the issue of carbon border tax adjustment. It's at the beginning. We need to look at it to see how it accords with WTO rules and how this instrument, if it is proposed for use, how it will work and how it can add. Trade can also play a role, as Secretary Alok Sharma said, on the issue of deforestation and the trading of forest products. A very positive role. We know what Unilever did in Indonesia, for example, on the way it managed its forestry products there. And we can all emulate that. But I'd really like to urge that we also look at incentives to countries to maintain forests and avoid deforestation as part of the package when we are looking at some of these issues as we move ahead to COP26. Now, finally, let me just say that looking ahead, we know we need to scale up green investments, both public and private, to accelerate the dissemination of climate technologies. Trade can certainly play an important role in facilitating all this and making sure that we provide the framework and the context and the push we need for lower carbon emissions and the greening of our planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ngozi. Especially the last point you mentioned, the clean investments. We need it mainly in the emerging countries where the bulk of the emissions need to come from. In North America, in Europe, it is easier to access those investments, but the mobilizing investments, clean energy investments in the emerging world is a critical topic for the International Energy Agency and I believe for the rest of the world. Now, let me move to China, a major country, and we have the Energy Minister, Mr. Zhang, with us. Mr. Zhang, very nice to see you again. And last September, President Xi Jinping made a huge announcement committing China for carbon neutrality in 2060 and an early peak. How do you see, Mr. Minister, the pathway to reach those early peak and the carbon neutrality? What is the role of energy sector in China, and how do you see the international collaboration the keyword of this meeting in that context. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Birol, distinguished Fatih Birol, distinguished Alok Sharma, distinguished my peer ministers, ladies and gentlemen, my friends. Good evening, and good morning, and good afternoon. Now, the whole world actually is pushing forward the green and recovery in the economy, and we have reached consensus on carbon neutrality, and this conference is really important. It's a great honor for me to be part of this summit. I want to thank you, Mr. Birol, Mr. Sharma, and also COP26, as well as IEA and other co-hosts. Thank you for your cooperation in the organization of the summit. Well, actually, last year, we have cooperated for green transition in the energy sector. And also we have reached consensus on the carbon neutrality and the carbon peaking in the sector. We have concrete measures as well. Last September, President Xi Jinping announced that by 2030, we want to peak our carbon dioxide emission. By 2060, we will realize carbon neutrality. And then in December last year, China wants to improve its NDC. And that is based on our responsibility of building a common community for human beings with a shared destiny. And also it is an important promise China has made for global efforts on climate and environment. Well, actually, China in recent years has been committed to developing clean energy. And then we are pushing forward the investment in non-fossil fuel energy, and we want to share with you some of our statistics so that you know what we have done. First of all, for renewable energy, we have the largest scale of renewable energy. By the end of last year, China's renewable generation installed capacity reached 934 million kilowatts, accounting for 42.5% of the total. And then the generation of renewables reached 2.2 trillion kilowatt hour, 29% of the total consumption.
We rank #1 for wind, hydro, and solar installed capacity and putting into place the world's largest clean energy power system. We have much stronger energy technologies and equipment with a fully fledged renewable technology industrial system, world-leading low-speed wind power technologies, and more than 90% of the wind power equipment are locally sourced. There is a rapid iteration of PV technologies, breaking our own world records of battery conversion efficiencies for several times. And among the top 10 PV module producers, 7 of them come from China. We have also come a long way in reducing pollution and carbon emissions. China's renewable utilization last year reached 680 million tons of standard coal, which is equivalent to reducing 1 billion tons of coal consumption or 179 million tons of carbon emission, and important contribution to the global efforts to combat climate change. We have also brought considerable benefits to the people as part of our innovative poverty reduction campaign. A total of 26.36 gigawatt of PV was installed in 4.15 million poor households, creating 1.25 million jobs, providing universal access to all Chinese people. We have been expanding green energy international cooperation. We have been stepping up cooperation in renewables, supplying over 70% of PV modules to the world market, which has boosted the development and utilization of renewables in countries across the world in a faster energy transition into a greener future. There's a long way ahead of us with twists and turns, but we're determined to deliver on our targets. It's going to be an uphill battle to achieve carbon neutrality, but the Chinese government will honor our commitment and deliver on our goals. We're going to focus on 4 measures. First, we're going to vigorously develop non-fossil fuels and continue to build a new power system where a majority of electricity generation comes from new energy sources. We're going to develop more ambitious goals for new energy, support large-scale, large portion, high quality, and market-oriented development of renewables in the new era, and work to improve its storage and accommodation. Second, we're going to focus or foster major breakthroughs in green and low carbon technologies. We're going to move quickly in the R&D, promotion, and application of key technologies such as storage, hydro, and CCUS to provide technical support to achieve our goals. Third, we're going to focus on green transition of energy consumption. And in key areas such as industry, construction, and transport, we're going to reduce the pollution and emission, and also to improve energy efficiency. First, we're going to step up international cooperation to push for clean energy transition. I call upon countries to increase mutual understanding and mutual trust and work as one. China stands ready to work with countries to strengthen policy coordination and technical cooperation. In particular, we need to work more together on key technical pathways in renewables, hydrogen, storage, and smart energy technologies. Climate change is a global challenge. It's going to be a long haul, and we all need to work together to reach carbon neutrality. We need to build a fair and just global energy governance system featuring win-win cooperation so as to provide confidence towards sustainable recovery. My best wishes for a very successful summit. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Minister Zhang, and especially highlighting these 4 points, as you said, to honor the commitments that President Xi Jinping made last September, and as well as highlighting the critical importance of international collaboration for China and for the rest of the world. Now, dear colleagues, from China to another giant in Asia, we go to India, and I am very happy to call on Mr. R.K. Singh, who is the Minister of Power and New and Renewable Energy. As we all know, India made major achievements in the last few years, ranging from bringing electricity to hundreds of millions of people to huge achievements in renewable energies, especially solar. And I would like to ask you, if I may, Mr. Minister, how do you see the next steps in Indian energy and climate policy as a part of the international community to reach our common energy and climate goals, and where do you see the international collaboration in that context? Over to you, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Birol. Your Excellency, Mr. Alok Sharma, my fellow ministers, colleagues. There's no doubt, absolutely, that all of us together are faced with a humongous challenge. And it's all of us in the same boat. There is only one boat. There is just this planet. And there's absolutely no doubt that unless all of us pull our weight, we are facing a disaster of gigantic proportions. Now, what I said was pulling our weight. That is important. We need to keep that in mind. As far as India is concerned, we made some pledges in Paris during COP21, and we shall more than achieve our pledges. We had said that by 2030, 40% of our established capacity will come from non-fossil fuel sources. We are already at about 38.5%. And in fact, by 2030, this will go up to almost more than 60%. So the rate of growth of non-fossil fuel capacity is one of the largest, fastest in the world. That's what independent NGOs have categorized it as. And that rapid pace of addition of renewable energy capacity will continue. And we plan to put about 450 gigawatts of just solar and wind minus hydro. You can add about 70 gigawatts of hydro there. So that will take it up to about 525 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel capacity. I'm not including nuclear. We are adding nuclear as well by 2030. So we are the only country in the world, only major economy in the world, whose actions in energy transition are consistent with keeping the temperature rise below 2 degrees centigrade. So this is not only the energy transition which we are doing. We have also made great strides on energy efficiency, reducing the per capita energy consumption, compared to the GDP. And we had promised that by 2030, we will reduce the emissions intensity of our GDP by 33%. Now we're already at 26%. In fact, we are perhaps the only country which has reached its emissions reduction target for 2020. In fact, we have crossed it, and we'll continue to we'll cross that as well. Our emissions reduction programs for the industry in only its second cycle achieved a reduction of 62 million tons of CO2 emissions per annum. Our LED program achieved a reduction of 260 million tons of CO2 emissions reduction per annum. Similarly, our standards and labeling program achieved an emission reduction of 45 million tons of CO2 reductions per annum. So emissions reduction also, we are in fact way beyond of what we had pledged. We are transforming our economy in other ways. We of course achieved universal access, as Dr. Birol mentioned. We added 28 million consumers in just about 18 months, which was the fastest expansion of access anywhere in the world. And much of it was due also to the fact that we went in for renewables in a major way. We've connected our whole country into one grid, working seamlessly at one frequency. And we've constructed green corridors for the huge quantity of renewable energy which we are adding. So we already had 2 rounds of construction of green corridors. We have taken up a 3rd round of construction of green corridors because we want to evacuate about 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy from Ladakh, which is the highest plateau in the world, but which also has the highest insulation. The coldest with rarefied atmosphere, but the insulation is the highest. So we are well on our way to achieving what we set out to do. And in fact, we'll continue doing this because our government and our Prime Minister is very clear in their minds that the environment is of the utmost importance. We co-founded with France the International Solar Alliance, which is an alliance of all the countries who will help each other, undertake to help each other to set up renewable energy capacity. And we already have 93 countries becoming members of this International Solar Alliance, which I think will be a great force for the fight which we have ahead of us. This is as far as we are concerned. We are well on our track. I mean, we have emerged as the fastest growing capacity in the world, renewable energy capacity. We have, added 139,000 megawatts in just past 3-4 years. We are continuing on the same path. We don't have any problems of finance, etc. But when you talk about the challenges before us together as humanity, now that is something else again. Now that is something on which we need to ponder, and we need to ponder on that very honestly, because absolutely, we can obfuscate and things like that, but that is not going to make the problem go away. You have countries which are, whose per capita emissions are 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 12 times the world average. Now, the question is, when are they going to come down? When are these emissions of these countries who are emitting 7 times, 12 times the world average, when are they going to bring down their emissions? Now, what we hear is that by 2050 or 2060, we'll become carbon neutral. And 2060 is far away. By that time, if the people continue to emit at the rate at which they are emitting, the world won't survive. So what are you going to do in the next 5 years? We want to know that. The world wants to know that. What are you going to do in the next 10 years? That's what the world wants to know. Now, so that is something which we are waiting to hear. You had Kyoto, pledges were made. You had Paris, pledges were made. I don't know as to how many of the countries have actually achieved the pledges which they have made. Now, these are things which need to be looked upon and on which we want to hear. As humanity, want to hear this. That is one thing which I want to say. 2060 sounds good, but it's just that. It just sounds good. I mean, I would call it, I'm sorry to say this, but a pie in the sky. What we want to know is what will happen 5 years down the line, what will happen 10 years down the line. When are you going to bring your emissions down to the world average or below the world average? Exactly. You see, the developed world has occupied almost 80% of the carbon space already. Now, in order to give space to others to develop, you have the whole of the African continent. You know, you have 800 million people who do not have access to electricity. It's not about us. I mean, we will achieve whatever has to be achieved because we get investments. But it's about those countries. Now, you can't say that you come to net zero. No, sorry. They have to develop. Now, that development will require consumption of steel in huge quantities. That development will require consumption of cement in huge quantities. They also want to build skyscrapers. They also want a higher level standard of living for their people. And you can't stop them because we have already occupied so much of carbon space. Now, I believe that it's important for all the developed countries to talk about not net zero, but about removing more carbon from the atmosphere than they are adding. Net negative is what they need to talk about. And they need to tell us as to what they will do by 2030, by 2025. These are what the world is wanting to hear. And you have to give space to these countries whose present per capita energy consumption is, let's say, 1/5 of the world average, whose present emissions is 1/6 of the world average. You need to give them space to develop. You need to understand that they will consume more and more steel, they'll make more steel. They'll consume more and more cement, they'll make more cement. They'll consume more and more plastics, they'll make more plastics. Now, all these will emit carbon. It will. And if you want them to go in for carbon capture, now that is another thing. About technologies. Now, are these technologies proven? Now, you say that by 2050, you will become net zero. How? I'm adding huge quantities of renewables, as I said. I mean, we already, our non-fossil fuel capacity is already about 200 gigawatts. What I'm worried about is storage. And storage is very expensive.
Yes, Mr. Minister.
I have added storage to all the bids, I mean, most of the bids which I have conducted in the recent past. And I'll continue adding storage so as to bring the price of storage down. But it's very expensive.
Yes.
Now, that is what we need to address.
Thank you.
The developed world needs to address as to how to bring the price of storage down.
Exactly.
Pumped hydro is one option, but that is also expensive.
Yes.
Hydrogen is something which we are going to do.
Thank you.
And, our hydrogen bid for large scale, about 2,000 megawatt capacity of renewable energy, going to making hydrogen. I'll just finish. We are going to do, but hydrogen again is very expensive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh. Thank you very much. It is exactly what we would like to hear. Two things I think you highlighted perfectly. One, the critical importance of the next 10 years. Of course, 2050 having a target is good, but what happens in the next few years, and especially in the next 10 years? I think Mr. Kerry also highlighted this issue. And the second one, the different level of developments of the countries around the world need to be taken into consideration when we all come together. And you perfectly also highlighted the very issue of Africa, which brings me to my next colleague, the African Union Commissioner for Energy, Dr. Abou-Zeid. Very nice to see you, Madam Commissioner, once again. So a very concise, quick question to you. How international collaboration can help mobilize investments in Africa for clean energy and also energy access. What would be your suggestion, Madam Commissioner?
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. Allow me at the outset, please, to again congratulate my very, very dear sister, Dr. Ngozi, for representing all the women of the world and also all Africans at the head of this prestigious organization. You are doing us all a great honor, Dr. Ngozi. As usual, this is not new for you. And also, like you, Dr. Birol, I particularly also happy to see His Excellency Mr. John Kerry on this panel. We have missed the USA, and it's a great really to see the USA on this panel along with all our partners here. I mean, the UK, India, China, and many others. And speaking of good news, and like you, let me just start by good news. In another capacity that I am in, not the African Union, yesterday we approved the first Egypt's green bonds with the amount of $65 million US. And this is a work that I have been overseeing for the last 2 years. So again, to very much to exactly to what we are saying. Just to add also that this is happening from a private sector, Egyptian private sector, which is, I think, fantastic and shows again the commitment of Africa, both countries and continent, to the green agenda. And as it was said, I mean, Africa, a low carbon and climate resilient pathway provides us with a win-win situation in simultaneously addressing our emergency and post-COVID recovery action plan, our development strategy agenda 2063, and the climate change challenges. Clean energy for us, for Africa, is the best opportunity to expand, energy access, to reduce poverty and to create jobs, while at the same time contributing to the global objectives. Though, as it was rightly said by India, we are the least polluting, we are the least contributing to emissions. However, we all know that we are the region that is most affected, and now it is becoming more frequent and more severe. It is thus in our best interest to join the global efforts to transition towards net zero emissions, in order also to mitigate future impacts and to reduce the cost of adaptation, and to make use of this huge and abundant renewable energy resources that we have in Africa, which offer a fantastic, as I said, opportunity for energy access to all, knowing that as we speak, 600 million Africans do not have access to energy. Now, I did start by saying that Africa is committed to follow a low carbon energy development agenda. And this is evidenced by many current national, regional, and continental initiatives on the continent. People seem to forget that this is the continent where there is the largest 2 solar power plants in the world. This is also the continent where there's a region, the whole region, East Africa, that, we have the geothermal energy that represents almost 40% of the energy there. This is also the continent that aims to produce 100 gigawatt from a new capacity by 2030. And through the various initiatives, I mean, particularly the African Renewable Energy Program, the PIDA program, the Program for Infrastructure Development, 54 gigawatt from hydropower systems by 2040, and I can go on and on and on. Now, that, of course, in addition to the many programs and large programs that IEA contributed very much to, like the Energy Efficiency Program, the Deep Transition Pathways, and we are now in talks with the UK and other partners as well for the Green Recovery Plan of the African Union. Now, what is the biggest challenge for us? The biggest challenge is to address the persistent barriers to energy development. They are technical, they are financial. We're talking also important financing gap. markets, policy and regulatory barriers, which require, us to, on the one hand, deepen, accelerate, refocus our existing partnerships to be more transformative, collaborative, mutually beneficial, and innovative. We need to, as I said, in closing the financial gap, to make it also more attractive and conducive to investments, both from public and private entities within the continent and from outside the continent, to exploit to the full the fantastic innovations that is brought to us by digitalization that help tremendously both the climate agenda, the leapfrogging agenda, the production and the transmission of energy, but also the mutual benefit to accelerate digitalization and modernization in various sectors, targeted investments in clean energy, to adopt also platforms, frameworks, strategies to enhance, the technology transfer, the capacity building across the continent and why not the globe. And last but not least, the harmonization of policies and regulatory frameworks at the global. Now, two things I need to say before I close. Fast tracking also of cooking, clean cooking. Remember, there are 400,000 people in Africa that suffer and are injured or die every year due to hazardous cooking. And what is also an important factor is to make sure that is an inclusive approach where women are included every step of the way of the value chain. But once again, then we all look forward to the COP26 in the UK to chart transparent, mutually beneficial targets, action plans, and commitments, and to thank IEA for its leadership in coordinating and stimulating global efforts and discussions, but also for always prioritizing actions and work for and with Africa. And I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Africa is always an area that we focus, we work, and make, in my view, a real-world impact in those countries. And thank you very much for this. Now, we started with the United States, heard WTO Director General, China, India, two major economies, and then we had Africa. Now I am moving to Europe. European Union, we are honored to have the Executive Vice President, Mr. Timmermans. In difficult days and in easy days, Europe has always been the champion of the fight against climate change, and a stubborn champion, stubborn pioneer there. And thank you very much, Mr. Timmermans, also pushing the agenda in Europe, but also beyond. How do you see, Mr. Timmermans, the role of EU to support the global transition while doing a lot of good things at home, including the Green New Deal? Over to you, Mr. Timmermans.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol, dear Fatih, for inviting me to contribute to this incredibly interesting conference. I've learned a lot this morning, and I want to thank you for that opportunity. And I also want to commend the inspirational female leadership we've seen today. I think this is something that will inspire my daughters. It will show to the world that areas previously seen as sort of a male dominion are now being shared with the other half of the world's population. And I think this is of extreme importance in the transition we have to face in the coming years. Now, I think this is one area where we have to keep a couple of things in mind. First of all, we are in a life-threatening situation. If we don't act in the next couple of years, our children, as we sit here in this conference, our children will be at war with each other over water and food. I think it's that simple. So we need to act now, and we need to act with a huge sense of urgency. Why? Because we're coming out of this pandemic in the middle of an industrial revolution with a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis in our hands. We need to make the investments to create sustainable societies. We have no choice. And since we're mobilizing so much capital right now, that capital not spent well will mean we will create stranded assets very soon, and we will put unbearable financial burdens on the shoulders of our children, and that's unacceptable. Also because, especially if you look at the energy transition area, if we don't invest now, given the length of the investment cycles, given the length of which you need for change, we will never, ever get to climate neutrality by the middle of this century. And then we will overshoot our targets and end up with at least 3 to 4 degrees increase of the world's temperature with apocalyptic consequences. I can't stress that enough. So what we're doing to create the right international dynamic, as far as we can see it, is by not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, showing domestically. This is an area where you can only be convincing if you show what you do at home to be convincing in terms of emission reductions, in terms of energy transition. We also have to show that this can be a just transition. We need to do that in the EU itself. We still have 30 coal mining regions. We need to get rid of coal as soon as possible, but we need to do that in a way that gives an opportunity to those regions to grasp the incredible opportunities of the new economy and to create new jobs for the people now still working in the mining sector. And I think that can be an example to many others around the world. I also want to highlight that we have entered into a net zero partnership with you, dear Fatih, at the IEA, to bring together governments and companies committed to make net zero a reality in the energy sector, because I believe the energy sector is going to be crucial. And then leading up to Glasgow, we also need to put the 100 billion yearly on the table for adaptation and mitigation in industrializing countries. And I would like to say, in a slightly more optimistic note, to the Indian minister, there is a possibility for industrializing countries to leapfrog over a number of developments that we went through in our industrializing process. There is a huge potential for renewable energy, for going straight to renewable energy in industrializing countries. There's no need to hugely increase your carbon footprint to get to the levels of well-being and wealth that you want for your population. There is a possibility to do it in a better way. Hydrogen offers a huge opportunity, and the minister was mentioning hydrogen as an expensive option. Yes, for now, but if we can create the right economies of scale, hydrogen will not be expensive. Just like we see now, offshore wind has become so cheap that we don't need any state intervention for offshore wind to be successful in Europe. And I could go on, but since we're already over time, I'll stop here. But I have to tell you that the only way to convince others to do the right thing is to be convincing yourselves in doing the right thing at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timmermans. Leading by example, I think this is one of the actions that our European colleagues are doing. And I am also thankful to you, Mr. Timmermans. Yesterday's announcement, EU and IEA will work closer together to bring the world to a 1.5 degrees path. So with this, I would like to finish. I would like to turn to Alok. Alok, you heard this several leaders around the world talking about working together, international collaboration. What is your reaction to that, Alok? As the chair of the co-presidency, of course.
Fatih, thank you very much indeed. I want to thank all our distinguished guests. We had some very thoughtful contributions in today's discussion, and it was great that people spoke from the heart, they spoke very frankly, and that's what we need in this discussion. So we move beyond the words and actually focus on the solutions. Secretary Kerry made the incredibly important point that tackling climate change isn't a pet project, as he put it. We have to listen to the science, and we can't get there alone. Dr. Ngozi reminded us that climate change is a risk to trade and economic prosperity. And of course, she made the point about we need rules to underpin the greening of trade. Minister Zhang talked about the commitment and the reiteration of strengthening collaboration, working together, and that's how we should move forward. And I look forward to working with him and others as well on the road to COP26. Minister Singh reminded us very importantly that we need ambitious short-term emission reductions targets. And as we know from the NDC synthesis report that came out a few weeks ago, we are absolutely not on track with those. So we need to collectively deliver on that. Commissioner Amani Abou-Zeid talked very clearly about the opportunity to use clean energy transition to reduce poverty and create jobs and a clean environment as well. Executive Vice President Timmermans, of course, talked very clearly about the fact that if we don't get a grip of this, our children will be at war over water and food, and we cannot allow that to happen. And therefore, the money that is now being raised, the capital that's being mobilized across the world needs to be focused on a truly green recovery. We need to build back better. We need to build back greener. We need to give truth to those words. So in conclusion, Fatih, I know that you will agree that we all collectively need to rise to the challenge of stronger international collaboration, and we need to work together to keep the Paris goals within reach this decade. Thank you very much for that, and let me pass back to Catherine Dixon.
Great, many thanks, and thank you to both co-chairs. We're now moving into the ministerial panel, so stay with us if you would like to follow ministerial panel 3. For all other panels, please go to the IEA website where you can find the links. We'll come back here at 14:05. Thank you once again for joining.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Anne-Marie Trevelyan. I'm the UK Minister for Energy and Clean Growth. But for this session, I am the moderator. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this panel to consider how we can work together to meet our Paris goals. We have a number of very distinguished guests here today and many more following through the live stream on YouTube. So I'm delighted to introduce my colleague, COP President-Designate Alok Sharma, who will be providing some opening remarks before I will then invite reflections from the rest of today's panelists. Alok, the floor is yours. And with the wonders of modern technology and sound, I will ask, if I may, our sound host to check whether Alok is able to join us. I'm afraid we don't seem to have Alok. I'm hoping one of the technical experts can help us with this. Perhaps we might wish, in the benefits of making best use of all our time, might I perhaps invite Angus Taylor, who is the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction from Australia, to share his thoughts with us now, and we'll come back to Alok in due course.
Well, thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you to the IEA for hosting this important and very timely summit. It's great to be speaking to you from Tasmania, which has very recently achieved zero emissions in its electricity grid. We welcome the IEA's focus on practical solutions, and it's very clear that international collaboration to achieve the development of low emissions technologies is absolutely vital if we're to achieve net zero emissions globally. The Australian government's firmly committed to getting to net zero as soon as possible, and preferably, of course, by 2050. But ambition is one thing, action and achievements is what ultimately matters. We're already 36% down on our 2005 baseline in our domestic economy, on the way to meeting and beating our 2030 targets. But as we look forward, our focus is very much on the how we're going to achieve these important outcomes. Australia's deploying renewable energy at 10 times the global average per person. We now have more solar per person of any country in the world, and the most wind and solar of any country outside of Europe. Now, that investment, as we heard in the earlier panel, is now being driven by rapid cost reductions in renewable energy and doesn't require the subsidies that we've seen in the past. We now need to repeat that success we're seeing, for instance, with household solar across the next round of new and emerging technologies like storage, carbon capture, green steel, green aluminium, and of course, hydrogen. Australia's technology investment roadmap, which we developed and launched last year, is a plan to get these and other technologies to cost parity with our existing energy sources and technologies. We'll invest $18 billion in low emissions technologies over the decade to 2030, and our leadership as a government is expected to drive at least $50 billion in new co-investment by the private sector and other levels of government in Australia. The goal we've set for each technology is very specific. If you take hydrogen, for example, we're targeting to get the cost of clean hydrogen to under Australian $2 per kilogram. We know at that level, it'll be competitive as an energy source for industry, power, heat generation, and so on. Now, Australia, of course, is a trusted supplier of energy across the Indo-Pacific, and achieving our hydrogen goal will enable us to support our partner countries' efforts customer countries' efforts to decarbonise while growing their economies. We're also collaborating on low emissions technologies with other key partners across the world, including Singapore, the US, Germany, Korea, and of course the UK. And we particularly welcome the Biden administration's commitment to advancing new technologies that will reduce emissions and create economic prosperity. The race to develop effective vaccines against COVID-19 shows what can be achieved when the world works together towards a common goal. In the lead up to COP26, it's vital that countries work together to get low emissions technologies to parity. Removing the green premium, the price difference between the economics of current technologies and low or zero carbon technologies is the key to widespread global adoption. This will make reducing emissions practically achievable for all countries across the globe. Finally, it's my pleasure to announce that Australia will be contributing $1 million Australian dollars to the Clean Energy Transitions Program. And we're delighted to support this program and the IEA as a forum to discuss and invest in the development of practical solutions to the world's great policy challenges. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. We now have our COP President delegate with us. So Alok, if I may, I'd like to invite you to make some remarks. Thank you.
Anne-Marie, thank you very much. My apologies. I think technology overtook us there. But look, can I also just add to Anne-Marie's welcome, my welcome to all friends who are taking part in this discussion, particularly our panel. It was great to hear from Angus just now. I look forward to hearing from all of our participants. As I said in my opening speech, enhancing international collaboration is one of my 4 key priorities for the UK's COP26 presidency. And of course, that is what we're here to discuss here. How do we enhance collaboration in accelerating technology and innovation in key sectors? Many countries have set ourselves these targets of net zero emissions or carbon neutrality. And as Fatih made clear in his opening remarks, we've now got 70% of global GDP covered by a net zero target. But of course, we know that change only comes about through action. And progress can be faster, and it can be easier, and it can most definitely be lower cost if we take action together. And if we work together, I do believe that we can innovate faster and we can create these economies of scale that we all want to see. We will create these stronger incentives for investment, and of course, level playing fields, which is so important. But I just want to re-emphasize my point that these gains depend on our targeting collaboration within each sector. Each emitting sector faces different challenges, as we know. So let's take the power sector. The challenge is to reform electricity markets and to support coal communities in a just transition. This, of course, is very different from stopping deforestation, where we need level playing fields so that sustainably produced commodities can compete in global markets. The road transport sector, again, is different. The challenge here is to shift industry investment more quickly towards zero-emission vehicles so that zero-emission vehicles are cheaper than petrol and diesel cars all over the world. Now, we know there is a very rich history of practical collaboration on climate change going back many years. And yet, I have to say, we have lacked the focused collaboration in each sector that we need to deliver this critical mass of countries to shift the global market in individual sectors. So we need ministers coming together. Ministers are actually responsible for relevant policy, not just environment ministers and foreign ministers, but indeed all those relevant policy ministers. And we also need a diverse group of ministers, particularly in terms of gender representation. I believe we must broaden our collaboration, and it is why, as I said this morning, together with partners, we have created 3 new fora in 3 of the largest emitting sectors, energy, transport, and land use. And that is why we must ensure that there are clear structures for governments, businesses, and non-state actors to work together internationally in each emitting sector. That is, as far as I'm concerned, very much the proposition for discussion in this session and more widely in today's summit. And I therefore look forward to hearing the views of all our panelists. And I really want to ensure that COP26 is not only the moment where we agree on the vital common goals of net zero, but when we begin that serious work to achieve it together. Thank you very much indeed, and let me hand back to my dear friend, Amri Trevelyan.
CPD, thank you very much indeed for those thoughtful words. If I may, I'd like now to turn to the Czech Republic and to René Nedela, who is the Deputy Energy Minister.
Okay, thank you. I hope that you hear me well. Yes, yes. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to thank the organizers for holding this remarkable summit. It is my pleasure to contribute to discussions dedicated to the pressing aspects of getting to net zero. We need to keep in mind that in terms of meeting the climate commitments, different countries have different paths and needs according to their specification. But it is desirable that we work together in order to ensure swift, affordable, and just transition. The Czech Republic, as part of the European Union, remains committed to the common target of reaching climate neutrality by 2050 and supports an increased emphasis on cost-effective decarbonization of different sectors. As many time is very limited today, I will focus on international cooperation in a handful of technology areas playing a vital role in our climate efforts. Firstly, hydrogen. The Czech Republic is founding a member of the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, an active member of Hydrogen Europe, and closely cooperates with the European Commission's DG GROW in the area of hydrogen technologies. As increased production of hydrogen in the near future is expected, we are currently developing our own national hydrogen strategy, which aims to enable greenhouse gas emissions reduction while maintaining the performance and export potential of the Czech industry. Secondly, nuclear. We cherish our extensive collaboration under International Energy Agency, Nuclear Energy Agency, and International Atomic Energy Agency, whose expertise has been of immense benefit to the Czech Republic. Furthermore, we monitor ongoing development of small modular reactors with great interest. Our research institutions are developing a molten salt reactor, Energy Well, and a gas-cooled fast reactor, Allegro. We also see the potential of nuclear in hydrogen production. Thirdly, carbon capture and storage. I would like to highlight the Czech-Norwegian cooperation on the CO2 Spicer project, as this will most likely to be the first ever pilot project on CO2 storage in Central and Eastern Europe. Finally, energy storage. Together with other EU member states, we are taking part in the European Battery Alliance, which aims to develop an innovative, competitive, and sustainable battery value chain. Moreover, I am pleased to announce that the Czech Republic has recently joined the IEA's Energy Storage Technology Collaboration Program, where our research are going to focus on Carnot batteries. We are convinced that the TCP expert platforms provide vast opportunities for mutual beneficial cooperation in research, development, and implementation of future-proof technologies. I would like to conclude by stating that the Czech Republic very much appreciates and benefits from the diverse energy cooperation and many more initiatives, both on the EU and international level. Thank you for your attention and look forward for future collaboration. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. Now, if I may, I will turn to Maria Gabriel, who is the Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth at the European Commission. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Distinguished colleagues, thank you very much. I fully agree that by working effectively together, we can achieve the shared goals of Paris Agreement faster and at a lower cost. Half of the emissions reductions necessary to achieve our shared climate ambition depend on technologies that require innovation and investment to become effective and competitive. That's why for us, the European Green Deal provides a comprehensive roadmap for achieving climate neutrality, driven by the twin, green and digital transitions. But it must also be a socially fair transition. Central to accelerating decarbonization efforts is the clean energy transition. As we know, production and use of energy accounts for more than 75% of the Europeans' greenhouse gas emissions. This is why, over the past years, we have put forward initiatives on energy systems integration, hydrogen, the renovation of buildings, offshore renewable energy, and batteries. And our research and innovation funding is increasingly designed to deliver on these ambitions. For example, we are now evaluating the many excellent proposals received for the Horizon 2020 European Green Deal call. Here we allocated 1 billion euros investment for projects tackling critical issues such as developing green ports and airports or building up hydrogen capacity production. Horizon Europe, the new European Research and Innovation Program for the next 7 years, reinforces our stances in the area of the green transition. Our Green Deal targets for 2050 look far, but actually we are very conscious not to have 30 years to adapt. I see it rather as an urgent call for action in terms of research and innovation. To get where we want to be in 2050, investment should be decided in the coming years. That means mastering a roadmap of technologies, following a strategic prioritization during the lifetime for us of Horizon Europe that includes key partnerships with member states and industry. And I agree that critical mass and effective structures for government collaborations are helpful. So is proactively reaching out to private sector stakeholders. And in our Horizon Europe program, we decided to dedicate at least 35% of the budget for climate-related activities, including public-private partnerships and collaborative research. And we are also seeking to intensify and increase the impact of our research and innovation collaboration with member states through a revamped strategic energy technology plan, or more widely through a revitalized European research area via a series of pilot projects. Funders should strive to avoid duplication of efforts and costs, leading to locking in of emissions using suboptimal technologies and incompatible standards or infrastructures. And that's why for us, mission innovation is an excellent example of effective collaboration and pooling resources to achieve critical mass. Mission innovation members represent over 80% of global government investment in clean energy research and innovation. It involves partners in such a way to ensure accelerating innovative solutions in their journey towards the market. And research and innovation investments cannot do this alone. We work here with the International Energy Agency, with the International Renewable Energy Agency. I'm very glad that we have here the World Economic Forum, the Global Covenant of Mayors. The needs of the regional and local level are really important. And we are working, of course, with the World Bank and the Breakthrough Energy. But now, what I would like to say is that mission innovation is an agile coalition that enables us to find solutions to specific innovation challenges. It also involves our young innovators through our Champions program. And my strong wish is to give more visibility to this initiative, to have it more inclusive, reaching out to other countries. Just last week, we discussed with Minister Jobé about the upcoming ministerial organized by Chile, where we'll launch the second phase of mission innovation. And our wish is for mission innovation to be a key deliverable at COP26. Indeed, we are now expanding this model by launching impact-oriented public-private missions with ambitious goals that can lead to tipping points in the cost and scale of clean energy solutions. From the start, mission innovation has been twinned with clean energy ministerial. Here we have excellent cooperation with my colleague Kadri Simpson, and mission innovation and clean energy ministerial cooperation exemplifies the need to find synergies. And that's my last message, synergies between technology push and demand pull, and to improve understanding of new technologies among policymakers, infrastructure managers, and regulators. So yes, more widely, we are currently reflecting on ways to enhance international cooperation in our priority areas, addressing new opportunities, and at the same time to find the right balance with how to preserve our strategic autonomy and the international promotion of Europeans' research and innovation principles and values. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you to make net zero ambition a reality around the world. Thank you.
Maria, thank you. May I turn now to Francesco Starace, the CEO of Enel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you again to IEA for this great opportunity. And also for the excellent study that was presented, the World Roadmap to Net Zero by 2050. This is a report that really is a milestone in the direction in which everyone is going. And I would like to take these 2 minutes to talk to you about cities, about metropolitan areas. Why that? Because today we have about 50% of the world population living in large metropolitan areas around the world. And we know this is increasingly going to be the case in the next future. And cities and large metropolitan areas today accrue for 70% of the world's CO2 emission and 78% of global energy demand. So if there is a space, a place where we can really give a punch and do something about the CO2 emissions of the world, that's in cities. That's in large metropolitan areas. I have to say, with the World Economic Forum, I am co-chairing a very interesting initiative together with Jean-Pascal Tricoire. It's called Net Zero Carbon Cities, Systemic Efficiency Initiative. It is about systems that today are available, technologies that today exist, ideas that today circulate, best practices that are put in place everywhere, but to try and make sense of all this and provide city administrators, ministers, like many of you are, with a toolbox to understand what is going on around the world and how the experience of one, the mistakes of another, all together can make sense. And this word together that we've heard before by Alok Sharma, by Maria, it's a word that I think is really important to make a change. And if you think about it, in cities, we are together. We are really close together, more than we ever have been in the centuries of our history. And this issue of large megacities, large metropolitan areas affects even more profoundly what is shaping the energy future of the southern part of the world. I think after me, you will hear from the Executive Director of Sustainable Energy for All, Damilola, talk about what happens in Africa and where a large portion of the population still has poor access or no access at all to electricity, to clean electricity. Well, that population is moving to city. In Africa, the population living in large metropolitan areas is bound to treble, to go from 500 million to 1.5 million between now and 2050. So you can imagine the importance of addressing heads-on the huge efficiency, energy efficiency, and decarbonizing effort that we have to carry out in this part of the world. So the message here that I would like to leave to you is big effort on trying to make sense of how we use, consume, and go about the use of resources, not only energy, but also materials in general, in those large parts of the world where most of the population is now congregating. Cities need renewable energy, cities need energy, cities need water, they need everything because we live there. And networks are going to be extremely important to make sure that they sustain our life in a decent manner around these large metropolitan areas. So a big initiative is also going to be about building an infrastructure that moves electricity around from places where no one lives, but where a lot of wind is, a lot of solar irradiation lies, and where the people historically decided to live, large cities. And it's a strange thing because we now have a situation where most of the natural resources of renewable nature are far out when compared to where we want to live. And that brings in the big importance of caring, planning, and providing a network that takes care of this big metropolitan area world that is in front of us. So thank you for your attention. And I hope this has been a useful message for all of you.
Francesco, thank you so very much. You are so right that getting those networks right is going to be one of the critical elements, I think, of our success in the decades ahead. If I may, I would invite Monica Aria, who is the Special Advisor for the High-Level Champions for Climate Action, to share her thoughts now.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you to all of you for your insights. So I will complement what you have said, because I think the puzzle we have ahead of us is how to bring the best ideas for this imperative, which is transformation. And I like the words that the President-Designate for COP used: focused collaboration around sectors. So the champions have done something that is unusual, which is to focus on stakeholder activation, but we have a very deliberate agenda around sectors. So this is unusual. And let me share with you 3 things that have been very helpful in the work we do, because we have to work with everyone. So how do we do that on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and especially in the run-up to COP? So first point is very important to align our work around shared pathways. And even though this sounds very normal and common sense, you'd be surprised how that is not how a lot of stakeholders work. So this idea of having a shared pathway for each sector has been a very good way of bringing a lot of stakeholders on board. Not everybody sees the pace of the transition in the same way, but the tool is very important and it works. And we have put out what we call the Race to Zero breakthroughs this year. I invite you to visit them, and it's basically around giving that sense of sequence and priority per sector, where we need to be by the end of the year, where we need to be by 2025, where we need to be in the years that matter. Point number 2 is about the word experimentation, because we know that there is this drive for collaboration. We know that it matters, but how do we improve the architecture of collaboration? And in my particular case, because I work in the space of zero emission vehicles, and I really, really would like to see the end of the internal combustion engine within my lifetime, I would like to celebrate what the UK government is doing in the run-up to COP, because this idea of having sectoral campaigns is unusual, and it's an experiment, and I actually think it's a very positive one. Why? Because on the one hand, you create a space for governments where they talk, and then they agree and disagree, and at the same time it gives a signal to non-state actors. And where we do in the non-state actors space is to think about acceleration campaigns and ways of creating a positive ambition loop. And finally, and this is my bias because I come from Costa Rica and it's a small country with big ideas, I'd like to make the case that even though we have to be very focused on the sectoral collaboration, we also have to expand the circle of engagement, because sometimes when we think about the big countries and the big companies, we tend to forget the smaller players, and they can also bring a lot of very powerful insights, and they are agile. So my final point is that we need to make sure that whatever we do, even if it's focused in terms of the sectoral scope, it has to be ambitious in how we engage youth, women, scientists, leaders in communities, people working on the just transition, because if we don't do that, then we risk sending the signal that not everybody's welcome in the conversation, and I'm sure we don't want to send that signal. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Monica, thank you very much indeed. And I think, yes, anyone listening in who hasn't picked up on the race to zero absolutely should. I think all of you as high-level champions are being incredibly proactive and impactful by driving that through the whole world of non-state actors who, of course, are critical enablers to making us all achieve the net zero challenge that we are looking to do. If I may, it would be a pleasure to turn to Magali Anderson, who is the Chief Sustainability and Innovation Officer at Lafarge. Magali, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you to IEA, which has always been a great partner to the cement industry. I'm very honored to be here today in such a distinguished panel. All of you have stressed the importance of collaboration. As a large industry player, I think I can only concur. And we are ready for it. We signed last September the business ambition for 1.5 degree with science-based target. But we also know that achieving net zero is way bigger than what any individual entity can do. And that's why when I heard Build Back Better from Alok Sharma earlier, I think in this construction industry is hearing that message. So what we do, what I heard also is CCUS, carbon capture, usage and storage, and hydrogen mentioned several times, and that's pure music to my ears, because we need governments to develop the right CO2 transport infrastructure, very hard to say for French. We need industrial partners to help us to find the right geological storage, but also how to transform CO2 into, for example, minerals, which we can put back in our cement. But we also need our customers to be incentivized to adopt our new cements and new carbon neutral solutions. I could go on, but I will even go one step further, in fact. I will say the net zero transition world will fail if we do not manage to put together unprecedented collaboration between the industry and the policymakers in order to facilitate the development of the business case that is required to guarantee short and long-term investments. So, for example, as I just said, developing the market for low carbon and circular product. There's a lot of discussion right now around carbon borders mechanism, which is also needed. And of course, across the construction sector, we need to have a full understanding of sustainability performance, including life cycle performance. At our level, what we try to do, we are part of the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, where it's a coalition of states and non-states actors working together to do that. I personally co-chair the WBCSD work on the built environment. We have the Global Cement and Concrete Association, which has joined the Mission Possible partnership. All of that is great, but again, I will just conclude. Those collaborations are fundamental for us, because winning the race to zero is not going to be possible in a normal scenario. Just tweaking existing models here and there, that won't work. What we need is a true change of model. And as I said before, unprecedented collaboration. I think we're entering very new ground, which is on one hand is very exciting time, but on another hand, we know that we have no choice than succeeding. So we will do that with innovation in all fronts, industry and technology, policymakers, regulatory framework, and customer behaviors. Thank you.
Magali, thank you very much indeed. And yes, there are challenges indeed in that industry, but critical, because also in steel, we need those materials for the new green technologies. So finding those solutions is absolutely critical. If I may, I will turn now to Damilola Ogubi, who is, of course, as many of you will know, the CEO for Sustainability Energy for All. Damilola.
Thank you very much. I have the sobering task of bringing us back to reality in terms of how many people who don't have access. So please bear with me. So in 2015, just before the world agreed on the Paris Agreement, governments also committed to 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Underlining both Paris and SDGs is to just show how interconnected we really are and how we need to all collaborate to meet global goals. COVID has clearly shown us and basically made us wake up on how interconnected the world really is. In many parts of the world, the pandemic has reversed a lot of great work that has happened in energy and pushed 150 million people back into extreme poverty. Therefore, we cannot meet our global goals if we do not work together. Unfortunately, we know we are behind. Today, we see evidence of steps we need to take to achieve net zero by 2050, which is quite encouraging. But I want to talk about one step which is very important, and that's delivering sustainable energy to almost 800 million people who lack access to electricity and 2.8 billion people who don't have any access to clean cooking. So in a nutshell, there are almost 3 billion people currently during this pandemic who just cannot stay at home. This is why we need to realize that the energy transition is also an energy access story. And as we talk about accelerating technologies and innovation, it also has to come into the energy access conversation. We are standing at a crossroad where COVID-19 has created a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We can choose to go with business as usual, rely on fossil fuels and inefficient technologies in an attempt to restart our economies, or we can actually recover better and put clean energy, technologies, and innovation at the heart of our efforts to deliver sustainable development. But there's work to be done, and we also have to support governments to do this, especially governments in developing countries and especially governments in Africa. They need to be supported on policies and regulation, and they also need to be able to enhance and talk about how they are going to transition out of it. It has to be a just transition. It can't be taking things that are happening in the global north and then bringing it to the global south and just assuming people will adopt it. That's why I'm so encouraged, and I'm really happy to also be co-chair along with Alok in the Energy Transition Energy Transition Council, because what has happened here is that the UK government has recognized that you can't just tell countries to transition without finding a solution to universal access. This year, I really feel, is the year of energy. This is the year we need to be bold. To support this, the UN Secretary General will convene a high-level dialogue on energy, which is the first time in 40 years, at the UN General Assembly in September. As dialogue champion and SE4, we will support increased ambitions, and really happy to see the EU here, who's a global champion on energy access, and the UK, who's also a global champion on energy transition. And what we're trying to do is have more ambition as we develop energy compacts. And obviously, Francesco through Enel will be a global champion as we have through the whole process, and really lead on the private sector. So what we're trying to say is, on the way to COP and COP26, we need to create these moments. We cannot forget all these people. We need to bring this technology and innovation at an affordable price. And we need to say, what is the clean energy offer? What is going to be the difference to get people away from fossil in a relatively short period of time? Because right now, renewable deals actually take between 5 to 7 years to close. So it also have to think about time as we do this. So thank you for listening, and please put energy access with the whole energy transition story. Thank you.
Namalola, thank you. You're so right. When, yes, 2.8 billion people don't yet have clean cooking facilities, we have some journey to do to use the innovation and, as you say, the thinking that is right for every country's challenges to get that right. So thank you for making sure that that's firmly in the middle of all our thinking. Last but certainly not least of our speakers for this panel, may I turn to Børge Brende, who is the President for the World Economic Forum. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I think this is a real reminder to all of us that we are at the moment of truth regarding whether we can overcome the climate challenge, but also energy access. In many ways, it's like squaring a circle, but we will make it happen. This all means that we also have to look ahead toward 2030 and 2050, and we must deliver like real meaningful progress today, also in this decade. I think the good news that we have seen today is that we know the key to unlocking a sustainable future is ambitious and aligned action. And an increasing number of countries and companies are setting emissions targets. There is so much commitment, and I see also a big game changer now in the private sector. Now we must operationalize it and work together to speed up and broaden clean energy transition. From the World Economic Forum side, we see 3 opportunities where stakeholders can take coordinated action, all major areas of global energy consumption. The first is integrated net zero solutions for cities. Cities account for 70% of emissions levels and over half of the global population. Achieving net zero will require integrated solutions with business and government pursuing systemic efficiency, clean electrification, ultra-efficient buildings, and connected digital infrastructure. The second is financing for clean energy in emerging and developing economies. Trillions of dollars are needed, and unlocking capital sitting on the global sidelines today is so critical. The money is there, we just have to put it at work. Clear policy signals and tailored financial solutions at scale can help to de-risk investments and create win-wins for economic development and the environment. The third action area is the hard one. The hard-to-abate sectors such as steel, cement is already mentioned, aluminium, shipping, and aviation, representing today around 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Moving towards net zero for these sectors requires industry leadership to develop sector-specific solutions and for governments to support enabling policy frameworks which can now start to happen within the Mission Possible partnership. We have to walk the talk and make it a Mission Possible real partnership. Thank you.
Borge, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of you who've spoken today. You've given us so many ideas, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you to shape these in the run-up to Glasgow in November. Having listened to the views of you on the panel, it's clear to me that to meet our shared climate goals, we really have got to focus our efforts on decarbonising every sector of the economy. And to achieve this, climate change must become an issue for every minister, not just energy and environment ministers. We need collaboration across the whole of society, from business and civil society to investors and institutions, if we're going to achieve these shared goals. You know, if I take away a few key words from the session, it's that we've got to be much more coordinated. We've got to maximise technological development, making sure that we invest in and get the voices of our young people, those for whom we are doing all of this, that they are part of this solution, that we make sure the finance flows work, and that those forward-thinking young people from across the globe in the communities that they know actually are invested in, so that we're seeing the best of them, that we make our cities much more efficient, alongside making sure that those who are still far outside what many of us would consider normal energy access are brought into the fold with modern technologies. So I think, you know, exactly that, this can only be done through targeted collaboration. And I think that absolutely should form a central theme to our efforts in the next decade. As governments, we're going to have to provide clear structures to help do that, but businesses and non-state actors working together internationally in every sector will be critical. It isn't governments who come up with the bright ideas, we provide the frameworks. It's our non-state actors and businesses, young entrepreneurs, who do that. So we must never forget that. And we need to bring them all together to accelerate the pace of the transition that we need to achieve. There are so many highly effective efforts already happening. A number mentioned today. Mission Innovation, of course, is one, through to the COP26 dialogues in energy, transport and nature that we're driving forwards. But I think there's also an opportunity for us to do more. So always that enhanced international collaboration is so important. And I want us to ensure that there's a golden thread of climate action weaved through every international gathering that we are all between us hosting in the months ahead, so that together we lay the foundations for a really successful COP26 and place focused collaboration within each sector at the heart of international efforts on climate change. Working together, we can make this possible. And I look forward very much to working with all of you. So thank you for joining this session. And I look forward to hearing the outcomes of some of the other panels through the course of the day, and to working with all of you on the road to Glasgow. Take care. Thank you.
Japanese Minister for Economy, Trade and Industry to share with us his views, the issue of energy security and clean energy transition. Mr. Minister, thank you very much for joining us from Tokyo. But before going to you, Mr. Minister, if I may, only a few days ago, it was the 10 years anniversary of Fukushima. May I take this opportunity to recognize the great work Japan has done in the last 10 years, ranging from increasing share of renewables, pushing energy efficiency even stronger, and also supporting the clean energy technology innovation there. So thank you very much for this great work, and thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Minister. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. This is Kajiyama, the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry in Japan. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Birol of the IEA, as well as Secretary Sharma, the COP26 President-Designate, for all the efforts undertaken for this summit. I would like to focus on the importance of the energy, the security in the clean energy transition. Japan, in October last year, have stated our wish to move to carbon neutrality by the year 2050. We will be making proactive responses for global warming, and that we have also formulated the growth strategy for the 14 critical areas of the hydrogen, ammonia, the vehicles, the batteries, nuclear energy, carbon recycling, and so forth, so that the proactive measures for counter global warming will be translated into the major growth. It goes without saying that carbon neutrality, net zero to be realized, this is not an easy target. We need to bring on board the developing economies, not just the industrialized economies. On the other hand, there are many different circumstances facing the different countries in terms of industrial and societal structure, geographical characteristics, and many challenges. There are many uncertainties ahead. There is no sole optimum solution. So each country needs to select their own best mix. We need to utilize all energy sources and all technology to bring about realistic and diverse approach. We need to have the stable supply of energy, which is the basis for the society. We need to move towards a net zero, and also to reconcile with the cheaper and stable energy supply. The energy access to be expanded, that is crucial for the developing economies, especially in the process of transition. Energy security that matters very much, especially for the electricity area, which is increasingly important. We need to introduce even more renewables, but we need to also cope with the frequent, the dramatic natural disasters, as well as cyber attacks and other threats. We need to bring in resilience in hard and soft areas. We need to have diverse power sources to be utilized, meeting the needs of the different countries. We need to introduce the renewables to the maximum, and also to go for energy efficiency, but also we need to utilize decarbonize the fossil fuels and nuclear energy as well. Every technology and all the energy sources must be utilized. That would speed up the transition to net zero society for the whole of the world, and also to reinforce the energy security. The ammonia and hydrogen to be the mixed blend or to be used as a single fuel will be good for zero emission fuels, and we will be able to see game changers to avoid the lock-in of the technologies, to introduce flexibility for the electricity the grid, to realize emissions to be reduced for the existing thermal power infrastructure. I would like to strongly support the concept of energy security in the clean energy transition as advocated by the IEA. Based upon the knowledge of the IEA, we need to seek global energy security and also to strengthen the resilience. The roadmap towards the net zero in 2050, which is being considered by IEA, I strongly hope that these thoughts, as well as more realistic and diverse approach, will be included. And lastly, I would like to pay my respect to Dr. Birol as well as Secretary Sharma for their leadership. And I would like to continue to work closely with all of you for the COP26 as well as IEA Ministerial. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. 2 points, maybe. I cannot agree with you more that we need all clean energy technologies to be able to address this tremendous challenge in front of us. It will change from one country to another which technology they will choose, but we need all clean energy technologies to be part of the game. And the second one is energy security. We will not need less energy security, but more energy security, like clean energy transition, maybe a different concept of energy security, but it will be definitely a part of our work and the work of, I guess, all of us. Now, we had 5 ministerial sessions, and we have the chairs of those ministerial sessions that are who are going to tell us the takeaways. But before that, we have received from our followers many questions about one issue. I want to make it clear. When is IEA's roadmap to net zero coming out? It is coming out 18th of May this year, about 6 weeks of time, and it will provide a roadmap for the world to be in line with 1.5 degrees Celsius. And this will, of course, we hope, this will guide the government's work around the globe as well as our own work here at the International Energy Agency. My colleagues have been working on this since September with their international partners and across the world. And we are hoping that it will provide a good support for the efforts to reach 1.5 degrees climate target. With this, I would like to turn to our first chair, the panel one, Minister Jorgensen from Denmark, to summarize the discussion on the people-centered transitions. Very nice to see you, Dan. Over to you.
Good to see you, Fatih, and thank you so much. Let me start by saying that all the great interventions and comments during panel one only make me more conscious of the great importance of the work that we are undertaking with the new Global Commission on People-Centered Energy Transitions. There are many points that I will take with me chairing in this commission. To sum up from the discussions, I will touch upon 3 key issues. Firstly, and this, Fatih, will be something that you recognize, jobs, jobs, jobs. There's no doubt that jobs are a key priority when putting the people at the center of the clean energy transitions. Education, training, and reschooling the workers currently employed in the fossil fuel industry is key to ensure that no one is left behind. When my own country, Denmark, recently decided to put an end to all oil and gas exploration and extraction in the North Sea by 2050, and to cancel all future licensing rounds, we were very well aware of the potential social and economic consequences for the people and the community affected. It was crucial for us to ensure development and employment for the affected region as a pivotal part of the agreement. This includes a strong focus on skill development and training of the affected workforce. One of the things we are doing is investing in the development of carbon capture and storage in the North Sea. With the proper training, the same actual people who are now extracting oil from the underground today can actually put the carbon back into the underground in the future. So it's the exact same people that gets a new job in the same region. Secondly, it is essential that people affected by the transition are given a voice and included in the dialogue. We are affecting the livelihood of employees and their families. They have concerns, maybe even fears, obviously, and these should be addressed through an open dialogue. Thirdly, inclusion is also a key priority. Clean energy transitions need to take into consideration how women can be included, just as it is paramount that the youth is on board, as well as marginalized groups. So inclusion is a key priority. Now, going forward from here, the new IEA Global Commission on People-Centered Transitions has just had its first meeting a few weeks ago. We have 2 more meetings to come, one in June and one in late autumn, where we will finalize our policy proposals and analysis in order to feed them into the COP26 meeting. My team and the IEA are in close contact with the COP president on how to do this most effectively. The work on the UN high-level dialogue on SDG 7 is another forum where this topic will be embedded. Denmark is one of the appointed global theme champions for the energy transition team. Before I finish my remarks, allow me to thank you, Fatih and Alok, and your teams for the great work with arranging this summit. It has been outstanding. Thank you so much. Also, thank you to all the panelists of panel 1 for a great discussion today. Thank you from Copenhagen.
Thank you to Copenhagen, and thank you to Dan for your leadership in general, but also leading the work on the Global Commission on People-Centered Transition. To you, and of course to Madam Prime Minister Frederiksen, thank you very much for that. And we have high expectations from that commission under your leadership. Very many thanks, Dan. Now, I am going to panel 2 chair, Minister Tasrif from Indonesia, where we discussed how we catalyze national transitions. Mr. Minister, very nice to see you again in Jakarta, and looking forward to hear your comments, Mr. Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. Honorable ministers and leaders, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Well, speakers were unanimous. Clean energy transition must accelerate to meet global goals. They must be a key part of recovery from the pandemic. Bilateral and multilateral partnerships are essential in turning these goals into actions. We must move from planning to implementation quickly. Organizations like the IEA will be a critical assistance in this effort. Speakers agreed that more ambition is needed. Many countries, including Indonesia, can benefit from international support in this regard. We highlighted that all transition paths and all energy technologies, including power grids, must be considered in delivering global climate and energy commitments, and that energy security must be a part of transitions or ensuring alignment with economic development goals. We noted progress is being made in aligning finance and investment frameworks to foster clean energy transition actions. In many circumstances, the clean energy choice is also the best business choice. We also reiterated a commitment to reduce barriers, engage with private sectors, and accelerate investment in strategic areas. Participants emphasized that donors must be more coordinated, and international organizations must continue to foster country ownership of transitions. As demonstrated by IEA, international organizations must take into account the different needs and capacities of emerging economies, including energy security, industrial development, technological innovation, and job creation. We all agree that we need to look to the long term, both for global net zero efforts and also for our country's human development. Governments highlighted that now, more than ever, all partners must step up and support country-driven transition work. In Indonesia, we commit to an inclusive energy transition that respects domestic and international commitments and energy security. We are a country of over 17,000 islands, so we have our own unique challenges and circumstances, but we must also, as a group, recognize that many energy challenges that we face are common across countries and can be tackled collectively with shared tools and techniques. On this note, I would like to report with my great pleasure that Dr. Birol and I just issued a significant announcement yesterday we set out our intention to rapidly expand our cooperation on energy transition under the IEA Indonesian Energy Transition Alliance, an initiative which was endorsed by our President, Joko Widodo. The alliance will assist in the achievement of Indonesia energy objective under our grand energy strategy and provide support to our global leadership on energy under our upcoming G20 presidency and Asian chairmanship. I look forward to working with the whole of the IEA family under this exciting program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. First of all, what you have reported from the ministerial session you have chaired, those points, especially the role of international collaboration to catalyze the clean energy transition is very important, and all the 5 points you mentioned will be guiding our work at the IEA. Second, many thanks. It's a great day. It was yesterday, the landmark initiative between the Indonesian government and the International Energy Agency to support the Indonesian government in the clean energy transition. And I am very happy that you have your commitment. I have my commitment here, and of course the personal endorsement of President Joko Widodo was an excellent last final touch there. We are looking forward to support you, Mr. Minister. Indonesia, and heavyweight in terms of economy, energy in Asia and beyond. Thank you very much, sir. Now, let me turn to the panel 3. And this panel is chaired by Minister Trevelyan from the UK. Very nice to see you, Madam Minister, once again. Can you please share with us some of the conclusions of your panel on sectoral transitions? Thank you.
Thank you, Fatih. Yes, and I'd like to thank the speakers of the panel once again for what was a really fantastic discussion. The panel talked about the need for enhanced international collaboration to accelerate technology and innovation by all sectors, critical if we're going to meet net zero, because all energy use sectors, buildings, industry, power and transport, they're all going to need to decarbonise rapidly, and that we'll need half the emissions this decade to keep 1.5 degree target within reach. So we discussed that meeting those Paris Agreement goals will be quicker, easier, and indeed cheaper if we all work together. That key point about collaboration, whether it's the challenges of cities with the vast proportion of our citizens, or indeed for those for whom access to continuous energy is still a pipe dream. It's not a case of burden sharing so much as of opportunity sharing, innovating faster, creating those economies of scale, and creating new level playing fields to drive incentives for investment. Listening to the panel, it was clear to me that to meet our shared climate goals, we must focus our efforts on decarbonising every sector. To achieve this, that climate change must become an issue for every minister, not just energy and environment ministers. So we need the collaboration across the whole of society, not only within governments who set the frameworks, but from business, from civil society, and of course the financial institutions and investors. This kind of cooperation needs those clear structures so that businesses, non-state actors and governments can work together internationally across the global economy. So we discussed many highly effective efforts already happening, from things like mission innovation through to the COP26 dialogues in clean energy, in clean transport, and in nature, and the Mission Possible partnership. But I think there was a clear sense that there's an opportunity for us to do more, so that together we really can lay the foundations for a decade of delivery, turning those global targets that we've all agreed to under Paris into concrete actions, and really placing focused collaboration within each sector at the heart of our international efforts on climate change in the next 10 years, because then only then will we be able to meet our shared climate goals. So a really great panel. Thank you, Fatih.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. This is excellent, because when you look at certain sectors, especially, international collaboration is so important, such as shipping, such as aviation, such as iron and steel. Only through real international collaboration, we can achieve results which can be accepted by everybody. Thank you very much for that, Madam Minister. Now, may I go to now Ottawa, to Canada? We have Minister O'Regan. Very nice to see you, Mr. Minister, once again. Mr. Minister, I understood that you chaired the session on a very critical topic, mobilizing finance. Mobilizing finance is, in my view, one of the nerve centers of the clean energy transition. We know that in the world there is enough capital, but how we bring this capital to clean energy is a key question that we are working on. But looking forward to hear your views, Mr. Minister.
Fatih, thanks once again. And let me clarify, I'm not in Ottawa, our nation's capital. In fact, like many of my colleagues, I haven't been to my nation's capital in about a year because of the lockdown. I'm on the island of Newfoundland, which is my home, the city of St. John's. And we're an oil-producing region of Canada, an offshore oil-producing region. So when we speak about inclusion, as you and I do so often, making sure that regions, workers, industries are all included, I live it and breathe it here. This is why I speak with it with such passion, as you know. Listen, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the IEA for bringing us together, because I think there are very few other organizations that can bring together players of such high rank and high caliber. This is a room of decision makers, and it's important. And Fatih, let me take a moment to add Canada's support to the IEA COP26 7 key principles for implementing net zero. Like you said, Fatih, we have to work together, and I think that this will help us do that. As you said, I co-chaired a really engaging panel on clean energy investment with my colleague from Colombia, Minister Puello. The starting point for our discussion, to reach net zero, we need massive investments in clean energy. The market is changing. Investors around the world are increasingly making clear choices. They are putting their money into businesses, industries, and jurisdictions that are taking meaningful climate action. And they are divesting away from those, in their view, that are not. This is how we will be successful, ensuring that our businesses are competitive and creating jobs. It is all part of putting people and workers at the center of our energy transition, just as our colleagues discussed under panel 1. We all recognize this. We heard that countries are putting measures in place to help guide markets to invest in clean energy, particularly as part of building back better from COVID-19. But at the same time, gaps remain, and we're not where we need to be. There is a need for policies that are specifically tailored to these remaining gaps and barriers in key energy sectors. There's also a need for regular and continued dialogue with our private sector colleagues to hear from them directly where we can on the remaining risks and barriers that they're facing. We need the clean energy business case to be clear for investors everywhere so we can raise the capital required to reach net zero. So we talked about how to get there and how we can better collaborate to reach our goals. Governments need to outline clear goals for decarbonizing the various sectors of the economy so that the private sector can respond accordingly. Our regulatory frameworks must provide the right incentives for investments in clean energy, including the importance of putting a price on carbon. We need to use public funds to incent acceleration of development and deployment of technologies and to crowd in private investments. As governments, we can also accelerate the use of green transition bonds and loans by developing taxonomies to guide investment decisions in clean energy investments. Governments can also de-risk investments in clean energy and energy efficiency in developing countries. And we need to build bridges between the international initiatives that already exist and strengthen them. For example, we can learn from the Powering Past Coal Alliance, which Canada leads with the UK, working with the financial sector to move beyond coal and toward clean energy investments. But us together here, this is so important. We need to keep sharing best practices and learning from one another. And it's the IEA that does this so well. As decision makers, as leaders, we need to learn from one another firsthand on ways to make clean energy investments more attractive globally. The principles and the proposition statements that we discussed outline even greater international collaboration on energy and a stronger role for the IEA. And I look forward to continuing these discussions to see what we can agree upon at the next IEA ministerial. Again, Fatih, I want to thank you and the IEA and all the panelists who participated for an excellent discussion.
Thank you very much, Seamus. It's an excellent summary and marching orders of many of the work we are doing at the IEA. One critical issue, in my view, is again, I mentioned beginning of this summit, how we mobilize clean energy investments in the emerging countries. This is extremely critical because A, bulk of the emissions are coming from there, and B, in Europe, North America, it is easier to have access to that capital more than the emerging countries. But the points you have made are excellent, Seamus, and we will look at them as we are preparing a major study with the World Bank and the World Economic Forum to provide some practical insights to governments, other stakeholders, how we can accelerate the clean energy investments in emerging countries. Very many thanks. Now, the final session is about how we build confidence that the commitments will be met. And we are fortunate that this session was chaired by Vice President Teresa Ribera from Spain. Teresa, thank you very much, and the floor is yours. Very nice to see you.
Very nice to see you too, Fatih, and very nice to see so many committed friends in the screen working for climate action. We have held a very interesting and comprehensive discussion on how to build confidence, knowing that confidence is the main driver to accelerate climate action. The first message I would like to stress is that we all agree on the urgency. This is not an incremental small step. It is we need to ensure is that we make radical changes in an urgent manner, knowing that the emotions, the understandings, the fears may differ from one region to another, but confidence to be built needs to be consistent with domestic action and needs to take into consideration the concerns and the fears from all the different regions. The second message is that we need to ensure credible short-term goals. Of course, long-term goals are very important, but in order to be able to follow and to track what we do, short and mid-term goals are relevant, as it is important to ensure the proper tracking and transparency to build confidence among the different players, public, private, governments from different countries. We think that decarbonization, electrification, as it has been stated, is key, and that provides confidence not only on achieving the goals, but also building environment, building platforms, building green hubs in our different countries where people, where institutions can work together so that we experience the confidence through the action. The fifth message I would like to stress is that we all agreed on the importance of building proper environments, proper context in the regulatory initiatives coming from government. So policy consistency could lower political risk, could enhance action, including pre-schedule understanding of when we can expect additional updates, additional pledges coming from every single player in the multilateral action. So the discussion on how to fix timeframes that are expected by all of us was something that was also stressed by some of our colleagues. This could allow a much more committed business community, enhancing these capacities and enhancing the opportunities and the good consequence of climate action among the business communities is also a main driver to foster confidence, as it is, in fact, to be much more serious on what is the role to be played by the financial community. We need to align the financial community on this line. So, of course, we need to close the gap in the finance discussion, but we need to align the financial players towards what the Paris Agreement states, as it has been proven that some measures have been taken on the different investment decisions along the last years, which are not very consistent with the Paris goals. The philanthropy sector has been keen to work and to facilitate our action. But with many others, they insist on the need to ensure participation and inclusiveness in the discussions and in the decision-making process, very much in particular talking to labor and youth, so that those that may feel that this is a great challenge, a great threat, can find also ways to provide some solutions. And a final comment that has been stated by some of our panelists, and I think that it is a very important comment, and I add my name to this message, is something that has been commented along the years. In fact, it's a kind of homework back to the International Energy Agency, since it is a leading institution that provides very important guidance on how to ensure proper roadmaps along the year. So there has been a claim to ask that among your scenarios in the World Energy Outlook is a central scenario around the 1.5, so to facilitate some additional understanding on how this can be achieved. And not only governments provide proper ground for confidence, but we all feel aligned, each one as at its own role. That could be my summary from our panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Teresa. All your comments are excellent, well noted. And now, without further ado, I am going to turn to Alok for the next session. Alok, over to you, please.
Fatih, thank you very much for that. Hearing some very insightful comments from the various panelists. This is the final session, friends. So I'm now going to talk to a range of our colleagues who've had key roles in previous COPs and colleagues who are also leading on the agenda on climate action in their own governments right now. And I'm very keen to find out from their reflections on the progress that we have made since Paris, and of course, very importantly, what progress we need to make together in the run-up to COP. So the Fantastic Four, if I can call them that, are Barbara Pompili, who's the Minister for Ecological Transition in the French government. We've got Christiana Figueres, who's a founding partner of Global Optimism, and of course, the former Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC. And we have Minister Juan Carlos Jobé, who's the Minister of Energy in Chile, and Roberto Segolani, who's the Minister for Ecological Transition in Italy. So maybe I can start with you, Roberto. Obviously, Italy and the UK, we are partners in COP26, and your country also holds the presidency of the G20. And it's great to be working very closely together with you, building up that ambition, the run-up to COP, including, of course, for our own G7 presidency in June. I'd love to get your reflections on what is your ambition for the G20, and how do you see that supporting COP26 in the year ahead? Is Roberto there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you, President Sharma, and good afternoon to everyone. As you know, I'm a scientist, just lent to politics, and my starting point can only be science. The IPCC reminds us that in order to limit disastrous consequences, global CO2 anthropogenic emission must reach net zero around 2050, and other options are simply not acceptable. A failure in reducing significantly the emission in this decade will make it impossible to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement and will hinder the planet from recovering from the current climate emergency. Regretfully, the UN Synthesis Report recently published confirms that we must be more ambitious at global level. as only a strong, like-minded, resolute, and inclusive, as underlined by the Danish colleague, inclusive and effective multilateralism, coupled with unity of action of the international community, can preserve the future and the prosperity of the generation to come. As the British minister said, effort must be done by all actors, both in the public and in the private entities. In this crucial year for climate and environment, the economic recovery can offer a unique opportunity for transformative change. While restoring the health of our economies, we invest in the health of our planet and we reconnect people with nature. As mentioned by President Sharma, we have to leverage on G7 and G20, which gather under our respective presidencies the largest economy, to send a clear message to the entire world in view of COP26. We're doing our part. Italy will host the pre-COP in Milan, an event designed to advance negotiations and find balanced solutions to contribute to the success of Glasgow. We will also give voice to young generations, which are the leaders and the rangers. If I can borrow a term from the nature protection vocabulary, of the future, rangers. In fact, in a back-to-back format with the pre-COP, we will welcome 400 young people from all over the world for the event Young for Climate, Driving the Ambition. In addition, in our G20 presidencies, we will organize in July in Naples the first joint climate energy ministerial meeting with a purpose to highlight the imperative of building back better. In pursuing the zero net goal, we need to set the climate neutrality by mid-century and at the same time to deliver by 2030 on medium-term targets. These dates mark the route for the transition that we have to go. We are conscious of the diverse starting points of our G20 partners and that there is no a single transition. Rather, many transitions shaped according to the national circumstances, while the Indonesian colleague has reported specific examples, the differentiated pathways and the wide array of technologies. However, the destination is the same for all of us, a decarbonized and healthy planet. We shall make the best possible use of the numerous instruments that technology and innovation provides us to align our recovery plans with our long-term strategies. Strategies which are aimed at taking advantage of the solutions that nature offers, enabling innovative solutions, strengthening green finance tool. Good investment will be key, as reminded by the Canadian colleague, and to ensure energy inclusivity, striving for the eradication of energy poverty. Let us be fully aware of the other side of the coin of every transition, the risk of exclusion and of widening gaps. The link between the environmental and the social dimension is clear when it comes to energy. We want this link to be positive, and this is why, and I thank IEA for its vision and leadership, this is why we are part of the Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, and we implement the project Digital Demand-Driven Electricity Networks, focusing on smarter digital power infrastructures to the benefit of developing countries. At domestic level, Italy is actively working in the framework of the so-called important projects of common European interest, planning investments in renewable energy sources, new clean technologies in sea space, energy efficiency for buildings and industry, and clean hydrogen in the industrial sector, hard to abate. For the international partnerships, Italy is strongly involved in the mission innovation activities. We co-lead with UK and China the Mission Power, whose objective is to demonstrate that power systems in different geographical and climatic conditions can effectively integrate till 100% renewable energies. Like wind and solar in their generation mix, and in addition, we are very much interested in proactively joining the new mission hydrogen. Clean energy models are already substituting at an accelerated pace the old unsustainable ones. The more we speed up the whole process, the more we will benefit from secure, affordable, accessible, profitable energy for all. It is up to us, decision makers, to raise consensus among all players to increase their confidence, as Teresa said so before. The proposed 7 key principle points at this direction, and therefore we endorse them. The IEA is well poised To be a model for global energy governance, Italy will work to consolidate this model in the next IEA ministerial. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Minister, and a very good set of comments, but I think particularly at the front, highlighting the need for the voice of youth to come front and center, which of course Italy is leading on. I turn now to Barbara Pompili, and Barbara, COP21 in Paris was of course his landmark moment. That name is very clearly set in all our memories, but of course a lot has changed since then, and in particular we've seen these net zero commitments that Fatih and others have referred to at the start of this summit. But the reality is, I think, as Minister Singhilani just reminded us, is that when it comes to the NDCs, we really have a very long way to go. So I'd love to get your reflections on the progress that has been made since Paris, but also really importantly, how we must ensure there is more progress in the run-up to Glasgow.
Thank you, dear Alok, dear colleagues, dear friends. December 2015 was a turning point. For the first time, the international community expressed its determination to lead a global response to the threats of climate change. The Paris Agreement was thereby born under the star of a science-based, effective and just multilateralism. 5 years later, the spirit of Paris still remains. The Paris Agreement is in force, ratified by 191 parties, and today it's our compass for international action. Each party is expected to act resolutely to follow its objectives. So yes, in 5 years, we transform expectations into commitments. In Paris, a consensus emerged on a new paradigm. The carbon neutrality by the middle of the century is one of its declination. And indeed, it is a race to eliminate as quickly as possible our carbon footprint to reach net zero emissions. Because climate change is no longer a perspective. We face a state of emergency every single day now, because we have entered the era of consequences, and the Paris Agreement recognizes it and initiates a shift into the era of implementation. In 5 years, we have also managed to collectively decide on implementation rules, on mid and long-term strategies, and showcase results. We have also been working hand in hand with those who want to take further actions. For example, France is involved in 47 coalitions across the themes of the Marrakesh Partnership, because the civil society is waiting for commitments by all actors, and because we must all be mobilized to deliver. The race to net zero requires, in particular, a deep transformation of our economy and of our production and consumption systems. And it needs to focus on those sectors which contribute the most to greenhouse gas emission. So in 5 years, we grew up collectively, but we are still not bold enough. And we have also lost a precious time. In Glasgow, we must find ways to avoid the same deadlocks we experienced in Madrid. It is essential that we reinforce the dialogue between countries and support the COP26 presidency in this regard. We will have to show flexibility, political determination, and solidarity. But next, and how to make faster progress? Well, we are now facing a disastrous health crisis, but it has not made climate change disappear. Quite the contrary. And the awareness still needs to grow because too many actors still don't get that we are at a tipping point of our civilization. I really believe in this. This year, a major step needs to be taken collectively. We need to update NDCs, publish long-term strategies, and close the Article 6. The net zero target by the mid-century also gives us a collective goal which has to be reflected into the NDCs. But what is important here is the trajectory to reach this goal. If we want to be credible, transparency and accountability must be at the center of the agenda in the coming years. To this regard, the global stocktake in 2023 and a new NDC to be delivered in 2025 are the first milestones after Glasgow not to be missed. We will have a sense by then of the trajectory I have mentioned earlier. Now, to fully implement the Paris Agreement, two words are important: solidarity and cooperation. We spoke about this a few weeks ago, dear Alok. Without finance, we won't get everybody on board. The transition must be well financed, and we must find the modalities to help those who are most in need. Let me say this: a just transition will be the most important component of the climate agenda to rally the largest support and to strengthen the social acceptance of these goals. Achieving a net zero economy therefore implies to develop technological solutions through research, development, and innovation to create green jobs, to give opportunities and hope to the future. And all this can work if we initiate a major shift of our energy systems. Net zero implies phasing out fossil fuels and decarbonize the production of electricity. And of course, mainly with the development of renewable. In the run-up to COP26, the UK presidency launched sectorial campaigns, and France supports them very much. The campaign on energy is particularly important, with the dialogues established with large coal consumers. I said it again recently in a meeting of the Powering Past Coal Alliance. I believe the world is still addicted to coal. And to reach carbon neutrality, we must drop this dependence. Coal is the first public enemy of the climate. Finally, in order to accelerate the end of fossil fuels, we must end subsidies. Trade finance and export credit play a massive role in the development of coal plants overseas, especially in developing countries. Let's stop this. Dear friends, dear colleagues, we will have many opportunities to discuss energy and climate challenges on road to Glasgow, notably thanks to our Chilean and Italian counterparts. I am an optimist. So let me finish with a little quote. The positive side of the time lost is that the remaining time becomes even more precious. It is for us not to waste it. So my friends, let's get to work.
Thank you, Barbara, for your very strong and wise words. And I love this phrase that the Paris Agreement is the compass for international action. So I turn now to Christiana Figueres. Christiana, you played a critical role in the formation of the Paris Agreement, which was, of course, as you know, a huge collaborative and diplomatic achievement. And of course, you haven't stopped your work since then. We would love to hear from you in terms of what you think were the biggest learnings from COP21, and what do you see as the priorities for the year ahead as we get to Glasgow in November?
Well, thank you very much, Alok, for inviting me, and thank you to you and to Fatih for pulling together this very important and timely conversation. Thanks. It is the combined leadership of the COP presidency and IEA that can get to this level of conversation. So thank you very much. What I am concluding, actually, just to jump quickly to today, what I'm concluding from the discussions that we've been having is that there truly is now a widespread agreement on the need to transition. Frankly, that widespread agreement was not there 5 years ago. It is now very well rooted. But in addition to that, what I've also heard is a widespread agreement about the urgency, about acceleration, and the fact that this transition needs to occur in a timely fashion, or else it will be absolutely no good to us. So what that means for me is that there is one very important, what I would call the golden key to that, and that is to put the IEA's roadmap to net zero to be the central scenario of the WEO of 2021. And Fatih knows this conversation. We've been having it for a long time, but it seems to me that there is now widespread support to really put that at the center of attention, because that would open the portal to both national policy development, a lot of which we have heard today already, and most importantly, to capital deployment in that direction, public and private, domestic and international, which is exactly what we need. Now, that roadmap would have to paint a prudent path that is people-centered, as we know from the commission where we're discussing this, and that does not dangerously rely on unproven, unpredictable technologies, but rather, as we have heard from the ministers today, that actually relies on proven and agreed characteristics. Reduction of emissions in the context of collaboration, cooperation, just transition, jobs, diversity of clean energy sources, and reliance on constantly decreasing costs of renewable energy to increase both access and energy security. All of that is common ground. Everyone has agreed to that, but we need the IEA to open the portal to policy development and capital deployment so that we can get to that common ground ASAP.
Great, Christiana, thank you very much for that. And you're so right when you say that there is widespread support, as we heard, on the need for this energy transition. And of course, there's agreement on the urgency, but you've highlighted finance as a key area, and of course, also the IEA roadmap. So I know we're all looking forward to seeing the details of that when it's formally published in May. I turn now to Minister Juan Carlos Jobé. Minister, Chile, of course, hosted COP25, and it's great that our two countries have worked closely together as we move between these COP presidencies. And of course, this year, Chile is also hosting the Clean Energy Ministerial and Mission Innovation Ministerial. Could you tell us a little bit more about your reflections on where we've come from? Again, where do you think we need to be as we move towards Glasgow in November?
Thank you, Alok, and congratulations to you and to Fatih for your transformational leadership and for putting together this very important event. Chile, as you know, is a relatively small and country and located at the end of the world, but I think this moment calls us all to be ambitious, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. Is what we did when we took on the COP25 presidency in 2019, is what we did when we approved our Energy Efficiency Act, is what we did when we launched our National Green Hydrogen Strategy last year, aiming to be one of the largest and cheapest exporters by 2030. It's what we did when we committed to phase out all our coal power plants by 2040. It's what we did when we pledged to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And it's also what we did when we committed to hosting SEM 12 and MI6, regardless of the circumstances we find ourselves in. I'm very proud of the ambitious commitments we as a community have all made to date. But I think it's a time, and the ministerial in June will be a great platform for us all to build on that ambition, to shift to the focus towards outcomes. Concrete action, the enabling of pathways to markets, and the maximization of investments in support of clean growth, job opportunities, and energy access while we pursue net zero carbon emissions. Many of the solutions we need to deliver the emissions reductions required by the Paris Agreement rely on technologies that are not yet commercial. So our work now must focus on delivering affordable and available solutions for the most difficult to decarbonize parts of our economies. By harnessing the ingenuity of scientists, engineers, policymakers, and business leaders from all over the world, we can continue to accelerate clean energy technology and innovation and support economic recovery from COVID-19. The 12th Clean Energy Ministerial and 6th Mission Innovation Ministerial in June is a perfect moment, I believe, to move beyond calls for action, to put our principles into practice, to actually take action. As SEM and MI host, Chile calls on ministers and partners to come with high ambitions backed by bold commitments and concrete action plans. Commitments that show the world how serious we all are about using our forum, SEM and MI, to deliver a dramatic acceleration in clean energy deployment this decade. I'm very excited for the work to come, and I invite you all to join us and come together to attend, to cooperate, to collaborate, to innovate, and lead on clean energy during this crucial year in climate action. Thank you, Alok.
Great, thank you very much for that, Juan Carlos. Very helpful indeed. And as you said, you're proud of the international commitments that have been made today. But of course, what is key is the outcomes. And of course, we look forward to the ministerial that you will be hosting. So the final thing that I want to say, friends, is obviously thank all our panelists for their very incisive comments. We all agree this is going to be a critical year for the climate, for our planet. And of course, we need to work together during this year so that we can make progress. There are going to be a succession of major moments. The next one going to be, of course, the Leaders Climate Summit in April, which is going to be hosted by the US. And then we have a range of other events, G7, G20, and many others along the way. And these will be critical moments where we can all step up and demonstrate the action, the progress that we need to make. And I really want to emphasize the fact that as a presidency, we want to see that green thread of climate action woven through each of these international moments in the year ahead. We owe that to our generation, indeed to future generations. So let's work together to put the world on the path to make the Paris Agreement a reality. And I can tell you from a presidency point of view, we will not rest over the coming months, and we will work very closely with each of you so that we can deliver success on the road to an COP26. With that, Fatih, back to you.
Thank you very much, Alok. Just to tell all the colleagues who did participate today's summit, who did contribute to this summit's deliberations very, very much. Alok, we had today more than 40 ministers representing more than 80% of the global population, more than 80% of also emissions. As the Canadian minister said, we have real-world decision makers around this virtual table. And I would like to thank you, Alok, to joining forces with the International Energy Agency. We are only proud to see that we can bring so many leaders, ministers, leaders of the civil society, financial community, energy industry, among others. Just to finish by saying that only in a few minutes of time, we are going to release our 7 key principles on international cooperation to reach 1.5 degrees goal. So these 7 key principles will guide the IEA work with the help of our governments throughout the year, and hopefully will provide a good contribution to COP26 and beyond. I am very happy to see that many ministers have already expressed their endorsement for the 7 principles, and I know that many of them are coming. You will see all of them in our website and in the international press. So many thanks from the International Energy Agency. On behalf of all of my colleagues, we are very, very enthusiastic for the next months to come, working with all the governments we have today and all the other participants. Very many thanks from Paris to all of you. Thank you.